of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Tistero. Chapter 40, Broadening Horizons. Helping the kid up, the sounds of the pros taking details and daring the men to try anything, lilting over the sound of sirens on the approach, Shouta carefully guided him back to the cafe, the boy's arms thrown over his shoulder.
I have a first aid kit,
he told him.
I can take a look at you before the paramedics arrive if you like.
You're not scared that my blood will contaminate you or something?
The teen, around Dobby and Tomer's age, laughed out bitterly, his green face looking up at him with the jaded expression of someone who'd been beaten down and bullied just because of his appearance. God, it made him angry.
Why? Are you ill?
No.
There's no problem, is there?
He smiled.
I'm Aizawa Shouta, and this,
he said with a nod as they made it to the door,
is the Noroneko Cafe.
He introduced.
I'm a level 7 childminder and self-defense instructor.
He furthered while shouldering open the door, the little cat-eared bell ding-dinging in their wake.
And you're always welcome to come here, all right?
Blinking at him, those dark eyes widening, the teenager shuddered a little as he was eased into the first booth, his body curled over the table self-consciously. His posture was just like that of Nobby and Tomra when they'd first arrived in his eatery, wasn't it? Goddamn everything! Wasn't just being a teen difficult enough? Weren't 70% of the global population registered as quirk users? Quirks have been around for 5 generations by now. Why were people still so vain and appearance-oriented? It wasn't as though this young man had chosen his power or how it would manifest, had he? To quote Omra, most people were idiots. But still, now that the kid was here, maybe there'd be something he could do to help him, and just like all of the other younger people he'd come to know and support, that help started off with a question.
Now then, would you like a drink? Something to eat?
Watching as the boy continued to hide behind his hood, he let out a shuddering sigh as he deflated.
My old man is gonna be so mad at me for sneaking out again,
he huffed grumpily.
I'm supposed to be in my room,
he added as the police and a paramedic first response car pulled up.
I see,
he said, his expression sympathetic.
May I ask why you were out and about?
Well, look at me,
he hissed, green hands pulling the hood down roughly, his pinked hair flopping down to surround a broody expression full of indignation.
When it's dark, people don't see me as clearly, so I climb out of my bedroom window and, walk or head to the arcade, I do stuff that normal people do.
He huffed, their gazes locking. He was daring him to look away.
But it doesn't matter that much,
he groaned out.
I'm not wanted anywhere. I'm just, you heard those dickheads, didn't you?
Those dickheads,
he nodded,
are a bunch of drunk, stupid, small-minded idiots,
he told him.
Anyone who judges a person purely on what they look like is...
he assured, his arms crossing.
You were stood across the road earlier today, weren't you?
He asked, his expression kind, whilst Ragdoll approached the medics and started to lead them to the door.
Why didn't you come in?
Too many people,
he mumbled, his shoulders shrugging, as with a thud the service bar door flew open to reveal Dabi and Domra, their eyes wild until they locked gazes with him, whilst at virtually the same time, the eatery's entry opened with another merry ding-ding.
Hello,
he greeted the uniformed woman with a bow.
This young man is your patient,
he offered before inclining his head at Tomoko, who gave him a thumbs up. Thank you, Aizawa-san. The charcoal-skinned woman at the floor grinned, her smile reassuring as she plunked her medical bag onto the desk and started to root around in it, whilst the bigger, burlier, multi-armed woman stood behind the slumped teenager, her 4 hands manipulating a tablet she was writing on. Stepping away and allowing the two to access the injured boy, the shorter female asking him a few quiet questions as she shone a light in the other's eyes, Shouta leaned against the bar as his boys approached.
How did you manage to go outside, take out the trash, and end up with the policeman here, kitten?
The decayed quirk user huffed, his eyes rolling fondly, whilst his partner shook his head with a laugh snort.
I'm just lucky, I guess.
He snickered, his eyes carefully appraising as the lizard-crooked teenager was chucked over by the kindly healers, one of those fancy new mist sprays ghosting over his scaly flesh to ease the swelling of some bruises.
So who's this guy?
Somebody was being chased by those jokers over on Ichi Street,
he stated, his eyes narrowed out of the cafe door's window after Tomoko left with a wave.
They've given me a new nickname.
he reported mildly. Oh, that'd be great. Do tell.
Jesus.
He snickered, his hands clapping together in prayer.
May peace be with them as they sober up in holding cells.
Chuckling loudly, one of the paramedics letting out a giggle before blushing and looking away, Shouta was pleased to see that the boy he'd helped was also cracking a grin.
And speaking of names,
He said a little louder.
what's yours, kid?
Iguchi Shuji,
He replied with a little bow.
but they'll probably know me as Spinner.
He said, his lips trying to push his smile a little wider,
I know you're Hellfire and Death Touch, right?
watching as his voice balked. The eatery owner cocked his right brow at Scaly Boy with a smirk.
Ah, so that's why you were here earlier, huh?
He mused.
See, I told you that someone capable of beating your best scores would decipher any coded message you left them on that server, didn't I?
Sharing a look, the partners leaned onto the bench, their smirks menacing.
We demand a rematch on Skull Slayer 7.
Tomra stated firmly, the glint in his crimson eyes causing Shuchi to boink, his features becoming hopeful.
You're not bothered by...
He said with a vague gesture to himself, the older of the two paramedics huffing at him as she leaned her muscular form against the booth. Oi, that kind of Buxton thinking is toxic, you know, she told him, her four eyes regarding him critically. You're at the start of your life, Iguchi-kun, so you definitely shouldn't allow other people's narrow-mindedness to stop you from living your life. She huffed her forearms crossing. I'm a spider, kid, she added. Do you think that I let other people's silly phobias and prejudices that stop me from training or doing the job I do, Watching as the green-skinned youngster looked from her to the shimmering visage of the other woman, and then back to him and his teens, Shouta nodded at him.
And although doing something about society's views overall is something that's going to take time,
he acknowledged,
you are very welcome here, okay?
sending the women on their way, with a cake to share with the grateful police officers who waved it in through the bay windows. Tsugarame-san seemed true to his word about stepping up his care of the area, didn't he? The three stayed with the gecko-quirked boy, Hitoshi still snoozing away upstairs, until his father could drive by to collect him. Dubber and Tomra had shown him around. They'd shared a laugh over the dinosaur console before Spinner had extolled the virtues of the system and offered to bring some games he had for it by. They'd all enjoyed a few cookies.
Whoa, this is amazing!
And soon the teens were yakking away like old friends. Small mercies. And when Ikuchi-san appeared, is similarly green but not quite as scaly, and his features were a little more anthropological. Fierce-looking face ogling the eatery before he'd slowed by the windows, peered in, blinked, and made a more sedate approach to the door, which, to his continued surprise, opened with a ding!
Hello and welcome to the Northern Echo.
He greeted with a bow.
Shuchi is fine, and you'll find him just out there.
He advised. The teens all sat on the beanbags and discussing animatedly their preferred RPG strategies, cheat codes, and favorite skins. Whatever that meant. I see. The deep purple-haired man breathed, his form still bewildered, but decidedly pleased. You're Aizawa-san, right?
Yes, sir.
He replied with a polite incline of his head. Sagging with relief, those pearlescent eyes still fixed disbelievingly upon his child, who was laughing and gesturing wildly with his phone. The man no doubt thinking the worst when the constable had called him to report that his child had been involved in an attempted mugging, approached the service bar with a deep, heavy sigh. Thank you very much for saving my son, he stated suddenly. The police told me that you'd stepped in because he was being chased. Again, he breathed, an anxious hand grabbing at his button-down shirt. Well, one of these days, he could...
Would you like to sit down?
He offered.
I can make you some tea free of charge if you like.
I'm thinking, but his mother is beside himself, you know. He chuffed his tone, astonished and relieved. But please, here, have my business card, he said, his hands now jamming into his trouser pockets. We would really like to thank you for...
Please, Iguchi-san, I will happily take your card and thank you for it.
He smiled.
But no further thanks is necessary.
He allowed the other skin flushing a deeper, perplexed green.
You, your partner, and child are always welcome here.
He nodded.
And from the looks of things, my kids will be more than happy to keep him entertained.
He chuckled.
There's been some kind of video game-based rivalry happening between them for a while, I think.
He snickered. You would... The taller, thinner man tried. You're sure? You mean it?
I'm not in the habit of saying things that I don't mean, he told him with a little shrug. We're open 6 days a week, and I run a study space in the afternoons as well, he informed. The food is pretty good, and I don't believe in overcharging people, he furthered. So please, should your son, you, or any member of your family like to join us, then do,
he offered, and when the other looked like he was about to say something else,
Oh, hey, Pops, sorry,
snapping his mouth shut, the older man was scrambling to where the hooded teen was sheepishly stood, those long arms wrapping around him and pulling him close.
Shooty, you could have been hurt, or was.
He started whilst pushing away, those long sucker-tipped fingers then grabbing him by the cheek.
Do you have any idea how worried your mother is? Sorry, Pops, honest.
He tried, an embarrassed blush staining his face at the tightly pinching fingers finally let go.
I just cabin fever,
Chopping those milky eyes softening a touch, the taller man pulled him into another hug.
You're safe, that's all that matters.
He agreed.
However, we're going to have another talk, all right?
He grumped before regarding the other teens.
Thank you for your time,
he acknowledged before offering a deep formal bow.
And if it's not an inconvenience, I would ask that you to be so kind as to speak with my boy again. What? Pops, you're embarrassing me!
The gecko-quirked boy hissed, his face now smothered with red whilst his arms flailed around abortively. Sharing a chuckle, both Dobby and Tom were nodded.
We're more than happy to speak with him again, especially if he brings some games for us to play with next time.
The burn-scarred boy grinned whilst his partner staggered.
And hey, we've swapped numbers, so if you want to meet us halfway somewhere, then we'll walk you here,
You are both kind, and credit to your father, Aizawa, thank you.
The tall gangly parrot stated with another bow, his platitude causing the turquoise-eyed youth to blink, his cheeks pinking a little whilst Tomura actually giggled at it.
Aizawa, that's your name now.
Rubbing the back of his neck, the secret Todoroki made the mistake of looking back to where Shouta was watching him. When the raven-haired man mouthed Aizawa-kun back at him with a wink and a nod, he'd sputtered and blushed just as darkly as Shuchi, whilst the Chodorti, now completely unable to stop himself, peeled out curls of laughter that had both Lizardman blinking and Dobby letting out a chuckled huff. All things considered, there were worse names to be called, weren't there? As the week rolled by, Kayama Nemori was starting to have way too much fun with the whole dating scheme she did up. She was very interested in their gruff little eatery owner, of course, however not in the way that they all thought she was. This was refreshing to meet a man who didn't want to paw all over her or make demands because her extroverted sexuality. Sadly, most pros she met outside of her teammates always brought out how her love of exhibitionism had led to an actual change in the law, as though it was something scandalous or something to be ashamed of, whilst the majority of civilians saw her as a novelty, the demisexual, sadistic side of her, that she couldn't help, it's who she was, and she was proud of it, goddammit all, was often paraded around the press as a point of fun. People didn't tend to take her seriously when it came to love or relationships, and if she was perfectly honest, she was getting a little tired of it all, and so why not play up to the cameras? Why not pretend like she was untouchable? Why not lead men and women on, get them excited, then drop them when by asking such basic questions as, what do you like most about me as a person? Or, when should we get married? Or, you can see me as the mother of your children, right? Then, poof, suddenly they were gone. Suddenly, playing around with her got too real, and off they'd go. Shouta was different. He ignored her coy remarks, lewd gestures, obvious flirtations, and instead, he brought her a slice of cake, a delicious apple cinnamon concoction sprinkled with toasted almonds and a dollop of cream. One Saturday night when she'd be sat in his cafe alone, Hizashi was at his radio show and Oboro had gone to visit his mother, and asked if she wanted to talk. They'd sat there for a good half an hour, Dobby very kindly seeing to the few late-night MU customers whilst they'd laughed genuinely about everything and nothing at all. And in one 30-minute block, he'd somehow managed to chase her blues away and suggested that she'd take up dancing lessons as a hobby to give her something to enjoy outside of pro-hero work. He'd even offered to take her if she had no one else to go with. How the man, as quiet, diligent, and hardworking as he was, could take one look at her and suggest an activity that she'd never even thought about but had fallen in love with was still a mystery. And now, well, she couldn't help but want to return the favor, even though she had a sneaking suspicion that he was gay. He'd become awfully flustered when she'd accidentally launched him into the #1 bro, and she'd seen him eyeing her teammates appreciatively. Or, given his self-admitted ignorance of such things, ace or aromantic. Not that that could or would stop him from dating and having a relationship with anyone so long as they knew and understood what his boundaries were. She'd be more than happy to make them aware. If not, she wasn't the R-rated hero for no reason, was she? She hoped that it wouldn't come to that, though. All she wished for any of them, herself included, was happiness, and if such happiness could be found in a relationship, regardless of what that looked like, she would love to be an instrument in bringing it about, of course. And from the way in which her two best friends, Sir Night-Eye and All Might, had become increasingly involved in the plans she was making, she just knew that they felt the same. Who'd have thought that she'd be surrounded by so many incredible gay icons? Gay icons who, as it turned out, included Shiratoko Tomoko, whom, while she told her all about their little friendly competition, wasn't the right word, was it? Attempts at broadening Shota's horizons had looked slightly crestfallen. She'd asked, half suspecting that the emerald-haired beauty was similarly interested in their stubborn ribbon-head love interest, if she was all right, and the girl's cheeks had pinked as she'd hesitatingly replied that she'd thought that this game was cute. That was all. She was hoping, however, that the young woman, who'd confessed to being a lesbian, her sexuality was one of the reasons why she'd had such a bad time at that stupid stuck-up Western school, might be open to potentially going on a date with her after she treated everyone's favorite cat dad to a fun-fulfilled evening. And speaking of which, with the date she'd be taking him on drawing ever closer, she was finding herself more entertained by her rival's sneaky tactics, information-gathering skills, and not-so-subtle questions than anything else. Oh, yes. So far, she'd had 5 texts from Sir Night-Eye. Please let me know if you have difficulty getting access to anywhere you'd like to go. Do you require transportation? I have tables pre-booked at several fine restaurants if you'd like to take one. Her pro team kept trying to wheedle details out of her, and All Might, the big lug, was messaging her every other day. Do you need any help making reservations? Can I help you in any way? Would you like to borrow a car? I can provide a chauffeur if you need one, if you like. I'm not texting you too much, am I? Have I told you what a wonderful idea I think this was? He was such a sweetheart, and perhaps the most smitten out of all the band. She had a sneaking suspicion that his sidekick, who'd never been seen with a partner, romantic or otherwise, was also playing a wingman for him. Even if Oboro and Hisashi were all starry-eyed when they saw their wonderful eatery owner. However, she was pretty certain that the older man, only by 10 years, give or take, would make the better fit for their show if he was inclined to such things. Something was telling her that the powerhouse would dote on him in the way that he deserved without getting in his way too much. Hell, if he dated either of her best friends, then the pair would no doubt become lovable nuisances who'd probably get onto the cafe owner's feet because, well, he might be physically younger than them, but there was no disputing who the epitome of maturity and responsibility was out of all of them, was there? God! She wouldn't trust any of them, herself included, Tomo-chan notwithstanding, because she was such a big-hearted, caring, nurturing sweetheart herself. 2 babies and Dabi, happy but open to chat, or Tomura, for even an hour. He was quiet and reserved. He tried to hide it, but she could tell that the kid wasn't a fan. Damn, the cafe would probably burn down, and it'd be through no fault of the flame quirk users either. Shuddering, Nemuri flopped under her bed with a sigh, phone in hand. That kind of responsibility could wait, thank you. She was a 23-year-old woman with her whole life ahead of her, and as much as she would genuinely love to have or adopt, Shouta had inspired her children one day. That was a day in the future. Then Sushi, padding over to the sheets to nest in her hair, the pro hero flicked through her contacts, found the number she was looking for, and started a call. Mushi Mushi, Zo-chan's dance studio. How may I help you today?